Hey, it's Debbie, and I am excited to have James from Qualia come back on the show to talk about the science of NAD and our mitochondria. As I'm on a mission to improve how I age personally from the inside out at a cellular level, so we need to address the mitochondria. And you may hear about the role of NAD all the time, but you don't really understand what it's all about. You hear it's popular, it's trending to get NAD, IV injections, supplements, but do they really work? How do you get NAD from a supplement into your cell to help it work? And where is it supposed to work? We'll talk about that. The Krebs cycle. Get ready to go back into a little physiology of how your body works. If you took any classes in college, as I did, going over the Krebs cycle and working on the mitochondria and the role of mitochondria in our bodies is pretty fascinating. So we're going to have James Schmachtenberger. I'll have him say his last name. So come on in. Okay, I've got James on our video to figure out what the heck is NAD? How do I stay fit and healthy as I age and not have this normal process of getting older? I'm going to get lethargic and have brain fog, cognitive decline, and get fat and just be in a wheelchair. So, James is going to help us understand what we can do to embrace the aging process instead of complain about it.
Awesome.
So,
Well, thanks for having me back on, and I look forward
well,
to
I thought
diving into NAD today. It's
you were the
the
man.
topic I've been studying and working with for probably 20 years now.
Wow. So you work for Qualia. Talk a little bit
Mhm.
your history, just briefly review if people are not familiar with you, how you got into studying this area.
Yeah. So, um, my pretty much my whole life has been dedicated to things in and around alternative health and human development. My first company, I ran a vocational college that taught alternative medicine and psychology. Then moved into the medical cannabis space and did a lot of the research in that area around, cannabis's use in different types of medical treatments. And then eventually ended up founding Qualia. Um, and with Qualia, there's a lot of different pieces, but I think for me, one of the biggest impetuses in launching it was that I've spent much of my life kind of studying anti-aging medicine, studying what's at the very cutting edge of healthcare. Um, and there's so much amazing stuff that's out there, but most of the things that are really good are prohibitively expensive for the vast majority of people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're oftentimes kind of unproven, experimental, a little bit scary. Right? Like the first time I ever did NAD, I went to a clinic in Mexico and got it IV. Um, and
You
and it
hope
was
it
super
was NAD.
expensive. Yes. I mean, I was really fortunate. I ended up getting to do it with the guy who did most of the fundamental research and kind of developed an AD as a protocol.
Mm.
Um, but still, it wasn't the kind of thing that most people would do. And so a lot of our work is to kind of study the very cutting edge of longevity medicine, even if it might be delivered in entirely different mechanisms, but then understand how are those things working in the body
Mhm.
and be able to then produce similar types of results in supplement form, making them, much more affordable, much more accessible. And then, one of our kind of commitments as an organization is we run studies on every single product that we build. And we actually run at least one study on every product before we launch it to make sure it does the thing that it's intended to do. And so it's both how do we take the cutting edge of medicine and make it accessible? And then how do we also kind of take away some of the concern that people might have because things are unproven by actually proving them?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it is understanding what it is. I think what I really find people out there, mainstream social media posts, viewers, scrollers, they see the word NAD, but they don't really understand what it actually does and why do
Hmm.
we need it as we age. So if you could just explain the role of NAD in our body, because I think it's just some trend right now, and people just, oh, I'm supposed to get this IV or injection and spend all this money. So if we can just give it kind of
Yeah.
a NAD 101 review, that'd be great.
So NAD it's basically part of vitamin B3. And it is the primary molecule that every cell in your body uses for energy. And when people are young, the body produces tremendous amounts of NAD. And as we age, the production starts to go down to where, as kind of a standard, someone who is 50 years old only produces about half of the NAD of someone who's 20 years old.
Mhm.
And so when your cells start to have less of their fuel source, less of their energy source to do what they're supposed to do, then that starts to create a whole cascade of age-related effects. And for most of human history, it was kind of thought that that was just how it was. And it's relatively recent medicine. I mean, probably, 20, when I first went and did an ADIVs like 20 years ago, and that was like the very beginning of it starting to show up in the world. Um, and the fact that it can be done through supplementation is really the last handful of years. Um, and so it's a super critical molecule that allows every cell in the body to work better, which then of course means every organ system is going to work better, every aspect of cellular health is going to work better. And so then that
Mhm.
has not only anti-aging type properties, but overall general wellness properties because everything has an opportunity to function at a higher level.
So you're really speaking towards mitochondria, how we create energy in the body, and every cell but the red blood cell, as I've learned, does has a lot of mitochondria in them. And to create energy, it needs this NAD in that process. And what you mentioned a little bit, what changes as we get older? What age do we need to start thinking about how to create more energy in our cells and support them as this?
So, it's interesting because most of the time what you see is that people don't start prioritizing things regarding longevity until they're starting to have some of the effects of aging.
Mhm.
Right. So it's usually not until at least late 30s, 40s, 50s kind of time frame when, things ache more than they used to, and, you're more lethargic and, whatever the aspects are. And at that point, it's absolutely great to get started. But I think ideally, really starting longevity protocols in like early to mid 20s because then the aging process is going to be slowed from a
Mhm.
much earlier age, giving more total benefit. And the more that you do to support your body when you're young, when it has the greatest capacity to heal, the more total benefit that you're going to see over the duration of life. So I think it's, at whatever point you become aware of the things that are available is kind of the time to start.
Mhm.
But, I definitely do kind of encourage people to start looking at this stuff earlier in life before they're dealing with any of the consequences.
Well, that's what I keep studying about all this, the role of our cell health and as we age and to embrace the aging process, not just say this is my new normal, this is what's going to happen, but taking ownership of our health today, recreating our current self so we can be the best self in the future, especially looking at your parents, how they age and their friends is what happened to me is looking at, okay, in 30 years from now, because my parents are both 30 years. My dad passed away, but looking at the whole aging process of people that might not make the best choices to what I can do now and live my best life, my second half of my life is really important. And you're mentioning 20s, but for sure, I think by the time you're hitting 50, you should start being going looking a little deeper at, okay, am I doing all the right things I can do today to be my best future self?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's so many things that as people age, they just kind of assume that what they're experiencing is an inevitability. And so often it's not, right? Starting to forget where your keys are more often, or waking up tired every day, or being achy, like these things are not inherently inevitabilities. There's so much that can be done to be able to modify it. And, NAD is a key piece, the right supplementation in general. But, as I think you teach in a lot of your podcasts, I mean, first and foremost, it's lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Supplements, like it kind of inherently in their name, they're supposed to be supplemental, right? So like an
Mhm.
NAD supplement can do a lot, but it's not going to offset if your life is, McDonald's, no exercise, etc. Right? So first and foremost is really prioritize getting the basics in place and, create systems to support that, create social hacks. Like for me, most of my life, I had a hard time committing to exercise programs, but I have a really easy time showing up to any scheduled time with another person. So I would then just start scheduling to work out with people. Right. So it's like get the basics down, put whatever
Mhm.
support systems in place to be able to help that, and then explore supplementation on top of that. And like something like an NAD supplement will tend to make most people feel better, regardless of whether or not they do the lifestyle changes. But
Mhm.
you feel more better if you do it on top of the lifestyle changes, because then your body has a lot of the underlying support needed to go through repair processes, to develop more energy. And then you're basically just feeding an already well-functioning system.
Mhm. Well, that's what I want to get to too, is understanding the order of operations for everything. As I work with Dr. Tricia Thompson on the Root Cause Revolution program, we create, a program order of operations for people. Let's make sure we are getting that morning sunlight. We are getting our vitamin D levels up. We are having proper drainage pathways open and peeing and pooping and sweating, all that, and our liver is able to detoxify in the right order and not be overwhelmed. So it's almost, when is it the right time to add in something as this? I think a lot of people start taking supplements that are not yet, maybe 3 months, 4 months from now, we add that in, but there is an order of operations. Again, the body has to have all the foundations set. And I find it similar to building a house, or you're taking, you have mold and you have to remediate. You don't just patch things up and start to build on top. You have to go back to breaking the house down, go back to the studs, work on nuts and
Right.
bolts, the rewiring everything and the vagus nerve and all of that before we start adding in this kind of the cherry on top. Or maybe it's midway through, wherever it might be for that person.
Right.
Find
Yeah, I
that
mean,
issue.
there's so many things now that are great for people to do, and it's not really feasible to do them all at once. So putting
Mhm.
real thoughtfulness, putting real intention into kind of protocols, order of operations. I mean, NAD is one of those things that's going to be generally beneficial at most any point. And, like, we talked a little bit about kind of the basics of, lifestyle, diet, sleep. I would say one of the other things that I consider one of the basics that is detoxification. Um, and we live in a world where we're exposed to a level of toxicity that our biology did not evolve for, and types of toxins that our biology did not evolve
Mhm.
for. Right? A few hundred years ago, there was no such thing as microplastics. Now, every bit of rain in the world is got microplastics in it. Right? You've got glyphosate exposure, all these things that we don't have entirely develop natural processes to be able to get rid of. And so you end up starting to get these buildups of all types of toxicities. So doing things like binders, doing things like sauna, doing sometimes more involved detox protocols makes a massive difference. Um, and doing and now interestingly, NAD actually does support detox pathways. So it can often be a valuable part of detox protocols, but it is really fascinating to see when you work with people over duration. Um, Almost no matter how good the therapy is that you throw at it, if they haven't detoxified yet, they're only going to get kind of marginal benefit. If they've gotten rid of the toxins, then when you start adding things like NAD and senolytics and stem cell support and all the stuff, then the benefit goes up at a much, much faster rate.
Hmm. So going back to the science of NAD and mitochondria, can you walk us through a little bit more sciencey how we create energy, ATP, we talk about all the time, but we have this process and NADH
Mhm.
versus NAD plus, and then we can kind of go into the mechanism of action and when we might need to add extra support in as we're speaking.
Yep. Yeah, so NAD plus is the actual molecule that is sort of the energy source for all cells. And but NAD plus can't be taken as a supplement. It's a couple of things. For one, it's a very, very large molecule.
Mhm.
And so it's large enough that it can't actually make it through the cell wall and get inside of the cell. And then additionally, being as large as it is and a couple other factors, it's a relatively unstable molecule. So if you take it orally, it pretty much completely breaks down in the stomach acid. And any portion that does get through to the other side is then too big to have proper absorption. So really important thing to have, but that's not a great mechanism to get it. And so that's where like what we're doing and what you see kind of largely in the market now is precursors that support your body to be able to produce more NAD. And in essence, so there's a bunch of different precursors, right? Nicotinamide riboside is a really famous one, nicotinamide mononucleotide. Um, but basically, any form of vitamin B3 is a precursor that allows your body to then produce more NAD. And so in our product, one of the areas where it is sort of differentiated is we're using three different precursors. Most products are only using one. And each type of vitamin B3 essentially acts on the NAD pathway in different ways and at different points. So when you use multiple together, it essentially creates more efficiency and makes it to where the body doesn't have to use as much energy to convert it into NAD plus. Um, and it still does take some energy because there's all of these enzymatic processes that have to occur in order for it to convert across the pathway. And so with our product, you've got three different precursors, but then we also add in a few other ingredients like coffee berry extract, resveratrol, et cetera, that are basically designed to support the enzymatic production necessary for that conversion. And so, with all of that together, what you end up seeing is a pretty dramatic increase in NAD levels relatively quickly. So, like with this product, we've done two separate double-blind placebo-controlled clinical studies where we did baseline blood labs initially, see where everyone was at, had them do the product for 30 days, and then retest. And the average increase across everyone was 67%, which is really, really high. And that basically means if you started this product in, let's say, you know, late 40s, early 50s, you're now getting NAD levels back to early 20s. And what, that also translates to is a more similar type of energy that
Mhm.
you had in kind of early 20s. And and all of the other associated benefits. Like usually when people start taking NAD, for the most part, you don't feel it right away. You usually start to feel it within maybe 2 to 4 weeks, and then kind of gets progressively better from there. Um, and it can have a myriad of effects because whenever your cells work better, all types of things can get better. But the most common things that people tend to notice are better overall energy, a greater sense of vitality. There's usually an improvement in cognitive function.
Mhm.
And then a big one is kind of improved recovery time. So, you know, that likely correlates to injury, but where it's really been studied is around exercise induced things. So you work out, you get really sore. If you're on an AD, you bounce back a lot quicker, which is both good in the sense that, you spend less time being sore, but also it means that, to the extent that you want to be building in your exercise program, you have the ability to do that more readily because you're recovering more quickly from each time.
Okay, so backtrack, 'cause I have a lot of questions. So with the cell membrane, if we're trying to get this into the mitochondria, correct? You need it to get into the mitochondria itself, NAD, or
To
into
the
the
best of
cell.
my
Where do we
knowledge,
need it?
that hasn't actually been specifically studied. What is critical is to get it inside of the cell wall. Um,
Okay.
and so that's what, like when we've done our clinical studies, that's what we were looking at is there an increase in NAD inside of the cell? To
Mhm.
then study it specifically in the mitochondria, I'm not aware of anyone that has done that.
So you're
Um,
getting it into the cell itself, and that's creating
mhm,
an effect and improving mitochondria function. It doesn't necessarily have to get through the double bilayer of a mitochondria cell wall,
right.
right? Okay.
Mhm.
So another geeky question, because I've been really going down too many rabbit holes lately. But when you have damaged cell membranes, how does that impact the ability to get NAD through the cell wall if you have damage, as in low phosphatidylcholine levels?
Mhm. Well, so for the most part, you can't get NAD through the cell wall, right? It's too big of a molecule that it
Yeah,
doesn't really
but
make its way through, whether the cell wall is damaged or not. So, like with the precursors, your body's then producing more NAD inside of the cell. Um, if the cell wall itself isn't healthy, I mean that's going to have a series of other effects that there's probably some linking, but I haven't actually seen research specifically correlating those two together.
so a local company here, have you heard of Me Screen? I did their
Oh
mitochondria
yeah,
test. So that's
yep,
why I was
I
trying
did
to
too.
connect. Yeah, that's what I thought. So I thought I was emailing you guys about, so it'd be interesting because that's how I got down this rabbit hole of phosphatidylcholine and the role of choline in the body and cell membrane. And because my score is really low on my me screen, and how I'm just going over it yesterday, how I needed to do a few months of taking phosphatidylcholine and
Mhm.
higher dose of omega-3 fatty acids to improve my cell membrane because it was impacting my mitochondria function. So it just made me curious if I have a damaged cell membranes, they're not, am I not able to increase my NAD production or increase my mitochondria function if I don't have these healthy membranes?
No, I mean, if you're doing something like NAD supplementation, you should still be able to increase NAD even with damaged cell wall, but almost certainly not as effectively, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you would definitely want to address both, but you would address them largely in different ways. Basically, what you described, right? So for NAD
Mm-hmm.
specifically, you're going to take precursors, and then for cell wall, that's pretty much really good quality omega fatty acids, phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine, things along these lines. Um, and because basically the cell wall is kind of a lipid layer, and so it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
made up of whatever types of lipids we're getting most. And this is one of like the major issues in industrialized agriculture or food system is, we have all of these monounsaturated, highly processed, hydrogenated kinds of oils. And when you're getting these unhealthy oils in, that's then the fat source that your body has
Mm-hmm.
available to create the cell wall. And and you can see the difference. Like there, if you go online, there's all kinds of images where you can see close-ups of cells with people who have really clean diets with high quality omega fatty acids
Mm-hmm.
versus ones with hydrogenated oils. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and the ones with the quality fatty acids tend to be quite round. There's a lot of consistency in the shape. The ones that are kind of more of the industrial oils, You tend to see kind of a misshapenness. There's a lot of like jaggedness in the cell wall. Um, so it makes a huge difference.
Also, a side note, I was curious because I always go deeper why, look at the root cause investigation, but how cell walls get damaged also goes back to the lack of building blocks, choline, due to
Mhm.
we need to build phosphatidylcholine from choline, but acetylcholine gets depleted because we get a toxic vagus nerve. So it gets acetylcholine overactive, using it all up, and then we don't have any left choline left to make phosphatidylcholine. So it was really interesting rabbit hole I went down.
It sounds like a fun rabbit hole.
I had to record a podcast. I'm like, this is probably just for my own benefit, but I had to get it out. So going back into how we need to improve our health for the future, we need to improve mitochondria health for why? Why, just kind of summarize what you said a little bit, but why is this so
Mhm.
important?
Well, I mean, so the mitochondria are basically they're called the powerhouses of the cell, right? They're what are often, producing the NAD, the ATP, and cells make up every single system in the body. So, if you want better brain health, if you want better liver health, if you want better skin health, right, it kind of all starts at the level of cellular health. And one of the biggest factors in cellular health is cellular energy. Are you giving yourself the building blocks that are necessary to be able to have high level, good quality cellular energy so that your cells can do whatever it is that they're supposed to do, right? Each type of cell has different types of functions. Um, but when you do that, then you have all of the associated benefits, which, can translate to living longer, but more importantly, it's things around health span. It's how, for how many years you are on the planet, how many of those are in a thriving quality of life, right? Where you're mobile, you're agile, you've got energy, you've got the brain power to engage in life, to be productive. All of these things are very much a function of the quality of your cellular energy.
Mhm. So that was my other question. What are symptoms of low mitochondrial function? That signs and clues that we need NAD supplementation precursors to make more NAD would be opposite of that.
Pretty much. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean there can be lots of different symptoms, but common things are going to be lethargy, slower brain function, um, being more prone to soreness, injury, muscle pulls, um, things like reductions in eyesight even have corollaries. Um, like most of the things that people associate with aging are
Mm.
in large part a function of less healthy mitochondria.
Would that be related to other areas that are off balance, out of range, as high insulin, poor nitric oxide production, other
Mhm.
things that can be impacting this whole metabolic chaos of our cell
Yeah.
health?
Yeah. I mean, there's absolutely corollary there. And I mean, human physiology is super complex. And
Mhm.
so it's not like with most things, there's not a one for one, right? Like your insulin levels are absolutely partially a result of mitochondrial function, but they're also a result of how much exercise and how intensive exercise are you getting, how much, you know, particularly simple carbohydrates and sugars are you getting? Um, what's the insulin sensitivity like in your body, right? There's a bunch of different factors, but mitochondrial health is definitely one of the core factors.
I said this other thought, people that maybe exercise too hard, too much carb
Mhm.
burning, and they're plant-based, vegan, vegetarian, if they have more susceptibility to mitochondria exhaustion, not getting the right ingredients for the mitochondria health. Just I see a lot of people that are
I
more
would,
plant-based and they, I would think, struggle a little bit more.
I mean, if you're exercising intensely, then having adequate protein intake is definitely critical. And for the most part, that can be done on a plant-based diet, but most people who are on a plant-based diet aren't getting enough protein. Um,
Hmm.
right? It actually, like, if you're not using animal sources, then it requires a different degree of attention and intention into your dietary intake to be able to get adequate protein.
Hmm.
And it is possible. And, I mean, there's a number of very famous, um, vegan athletes out there who are in incredibly good shape, but they put a meaningful amount of intention into what they're putting in their body and are making sure that they're getting the protein that's required to be able to do that kind of exercise.
Yeah, I just think it gets a little more complicated, and it is possible. You just have to really get the right parts, the right ingredients all together. So
Mhm.
going back to qualia, the precursors, cofactors, antioxidants, the other ingredients in the formulations, explaining a little bit more why this is different than just taking, you mentioned NAD itself, but if someone just takes another NR or NNM by itself, why this might be more effective for some people.
Yeah. So, partly the difference with ours is the use of three different precursors, right? So NR is one of them because it's one of, if not the most studied precursors out there. It's highly effective. It's what a number of companies use. So we use that, but then on top of that, we have niacin and niacinamide as additional precursors. Um, and just the precursors alone will cause a pretty meaningful benefit, right? Like if you look at products that are just nicotinamide riboside, there have been a number of studies that have been done on those, and they usually show somewhere around a 50% increase in NAD levels after 45 days, or kind of the majority of the studies that have been done. With our product, we were able to show a 67% increase in 30 days. So, both a higher increase and also a faster duration. And part of that is the fact that there's multiple precursors, but part of it is the other ingredients that we're adding to support the enzyme production necessary for the conversion process, right? Because essentially there's a whole pathway inside the body, right? So usually it starts with niacin, which then converts into niacinamide, which converts into nicotinamide riboside, converts into nicotinamide mononucleotide, which then converts into NAD. When then part of that becomes ATP, splits off, and the remaining part is niacin, and the whole thing starts over. But each one of those conversions requires a meaningful amount of enzymes. And so
Mhm.
the other ingredients that we're using are largely focused on making that enzyme production more efficient. And then one of the other things that we have, that came up in our research as we were doing it, is some of the ingredients also help to do what's called closing the salvage pathway. So in the pathway, through that conversion process, there's usually some portion of the NAD that essentially doesn't get utilized. And so closing the salvage pathway allows it to be more fully utilized by the body.
Hmm. Yeah,
So
so that
there's
was
several different things we're essentially accomplishing simultaneously with this one product.
because what are the other cofactors or B vitamins, magnesium, anything like those guys need to be involved? We always need B vitamins to do everything and magnesium. Just, are there
Right.
conversion enzymes, other nutrients that are needed to help all this factory production inside our cells or specific?
I mean, there's all kinds of things that are needed, right? Like ATP can't happen without magnesium, right? So even if you have great levels of NAD, which essentially then turn into ATP, if you're lacking magnesium, that process is not going to happen, right? So that's a really crucial one. I mean, B vitamins are crucial for most purposes. Um, like, with this product specifically, there's some of the most researched things in terms of the enzyme production are coffee berry extract and resveratrol. So we have both of those in there. But then there's whole other things that, aren't just about NAD, but play well together. Right? It's like one of our other products is called Senolytic. And a senolytic is essentially a class of compounds that help your body get rid of old senescent cells, which are often also called zombie cells, right? So a healthy cell is supposed to be able to do whatever its function is. It's supposed to be able to divide and replicate. And as soon as it gets to the place where it can't do that anymore, there's a process that's supposed to kick in called apoptosis that kills the cell off. But that process is done by the immune system. And as we age, we tend to have l- a lower functioning immune system, so that process slows down. So you end up getting these, these senescent kind of zombie cells that are no longer able to do something useful. They can't divide and replicate, but they're still there taking up the resources that would otherwise go to healthy cells. And even worse, they emit these inflammatory proteins that cause the other cells around them to become senescent faster. So there's if you take a senolytic and an AD together, now you have a really interesting thing happening where you're getting rid of all of the cells that are essentially no longer functioning, that are taking up resources, that are causing inflammatory processes. And then you're feeding the remaining cells with NAD, with their necessary fuel source. So now you've cleansed out the old ones and you're giving a lot more power to the remaining ones. And you end up having this synergistic effect that is really quite promising.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's similar to mitochondria biogenesis, creating new ones and get rid of the old damaged, broken ones,
Mhm.
and how to do that with supplementation, but also the exercise methods and sauna and nutritional therapy, just nutrients to help all that process along with the products that you're talking about.
Right. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, all the things that you just mentioned, and then good quality rest is another really important factor. And that's both a function of really good sleep, but it's also good quality waking rest, right? Quiet time in nature,
Mm.
meditation, right? All these things help those repair processes in meaningful ways.
But is that more because you are in the parasympathetic state?
Probably.
So you're able to rest, repair, and recover while we sleep, hopefully detoxify. But during the day, to be more resilient, we need to be able to shift into that parasympathetic state and not be living life as a race in sympathetic fight or flight. So your body can't heal and repair when you're in that fight or flight. So
Right.
it's more, what are we
And to
doing
not
lifestyle?
have that be your baseline state requires dedicated intention on a consistent basis because the world that we live in nowadays is so fast-paced and
Mhm.
chaotic and time-pressed and all of these different things. So if you're not intentionally taking time out to meditate, to nap, to quietly stare at a tree, whatever your form happens to be, um, it, in the world in which we live today, it's pretty much a guarantee that people are going to spend most of their time in fight or flight without those dedicated efforts.
Which is why I moved to here in my work in my glass house with the windows open and no walls really. I mean, there's all windows. That is probably why you are where you are, that we need to be able to take time out to reset, reboot ourselves and not break ourselves down like I did to myself. And I couldn't really feel my best self until I changed my whole lifestyle and my work schedule. So
Right.
sometimes you have to remove yourself from that source if it's mold in your house or it's just a toxic environment or mentally toxic environment as well as your work schedule. All adds up.
Yeah, I mean, there's more and more research coming out now in sort of the field of environmental design, and its impact on overall health, but also on longevity. And in many ways, it's obvious, and we've kind of seen aspects of it in every culture, but this where you spend your time, the space that you're in, has a huge impact on the quality of your health, the quality of your life, the quality of your thought processes, right? If you're in a place with, a lot of like fluorescent unnatural light, um, versus getting access to natural sunlight, huge difference. If you're in a place that is clean versus sort of chaotic and has mess everywhere. It's a huge difference, right? So it's kind of only recently starting to have like formal studies done, but changing the environment, and that also includes who and how you spend your time, right? One of the most important things in longevity and really in quality of life is how much time do you get to spend happy? And, there's probably half a dozen studies that have come out recently showing all the longevity effects of good quality social connection. Right? And
Yeah, the blue
that's
zones.
more important than all kinds of other things that people do. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, I
so,
really see that with working with people if they're lonely and depressed and anxious, they don't have a community. So it's really part of my questions, like, where's your sense of joy and comfort coming from in your community? Who do you reach out to? And a lot of people sadly are struggling. Part maybe that 5 years ago changed a lot of people to get to be more isolated because of the pandemic and doing stuff online, and those that are scared to go out in public, that they just got comfortable staying alone. And it's just amazing to see probably the research, the repercussions of that lack of community and isolation on people's health, mental health, which impacts gut
absolutely.
health. So with that, just nutritional,
It is all interconnected.
it is, right? So going into that, is nutritional therapy, lifestyle synergy, as we talk about NAD supplementation as one tool in your toolbox as Qualia. How does it fit? We talked a little bit about nutritional therapy for optimal results, lifestyle health, really focusing in middle age, what we can do to be our best self in the future. What are some other tips? You mentioned some, but if we can just kind of summarize some good action items people can make sure they're putting on their checklist.
Mhm. Well, I mean, so I always look at the fundamentals first, right? So exercise, diet, sleep, and then kind of social connection are the most important things, and making sure that you're putting as much emphasis into those as possible. Um, Not doing any of those things rigidly, right? Because there's also this phenomenon that happens where, now so many people on social media are posting all of their workout routines and all the things that they're doing for their health. And then, if you're not doing all of it just perfectly, then you start to beat yourself up because you're not doing a good enough job. And that actually has worse repercussions than not doing the thing. So, like, th- do the things, they're really important, but also do them in a way that brings you joy. Right. Don't do a type of exercise that you hate, right?
Mhm.
If lifting weights is not your thing, then go do a different type of exercise, right? Like, find ways to do the things that actually bring you joy, because fundamentally
Mhm.
that's kind of the most important part.
Mhm.
And then on top of the fundamentals, the right supplementation, really key. Sorry, that
Oh.
just died. But yeah, the right supplementation is a really big deal because like we talked about a little bit, where we live in a world that we are not biologically adapted for. For one, we don't get the same kind of nutrient density in our food that we did 100 years ago, actually dramatically less. So getting the amount of vitamins, minerals, amino acids, all these things, supplementation plays a big role there. And then supplementation also plays a role in dealing with the stuff that our bodies aren't designed for, right? Most of human history didn't have the kinds of stress that people are under. There wasn't clocks everywhere and everything was on, a rigid time schedule, and there was consequences for all of these different things. So there's a lot more stress. And that's where things like mitochondrial support will really come in. And then we talked a little bit about the right supplementation for helping the body to be able to detox from all the things that it's continuously exposed to. Outside of those, I think in terms of what has the most research, sauna is really, really valuable. There was a big meta-analysis done very recently, like in the last few months, looking at all the different studies that have been done on saunas. And what they ended up finding was that regular sauna use, and that was defined as 3 or more times per week for 20 minutes, decreased all-cause mortality by 40%. That's
Huge.
right. So
Yeah.
that means at least a 40% reduction in heart disease and cancer and all of the major reasons that people pass away. There are very few things that have that kind of benefit. So,
Why do you
get the
think
fun.
that's such a strong benefit by the starting trip? But why do you think that is so effective?
So there's a lot of different things that happen with sauna, but I think probably the most important ones, one is detox, right? So when you're sweating is the main the not the main it's kind of the most significant detox pathway that we have, right? So getting out the molds and the heavy metals and the glyphosates and all the shit that we're exposed to, that's going to have a huge impact. Also on the detox front, when you're sauning, you're increasing your core temperature. The whatever pathogens are inside tend to be quite temperature sensitive. And so when you're consistently increasing your temperature, you're also killing off underlying pathogens that you often don't even know that you have unless you're doing crazy amounts of lab work. So that's a big piece. And then um, it also does have a direct effect on kind of mitochondrial and cell health, largely through hormesis, right? That it's creating essentially beneficial stress that then in the recovery process from that stress improves overall health, but specifically improves mitochondrial and cell function.
So we talked a little bit about the benefits for athletes for exercise recovery and repair. What about other populations as cognitive health? You mentioned a little bit. I know there's some studies on the role with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia population. Anything on the brain health? Because that's kind of scary to me as I age to do what I can do
Mhm.
now. I think that's more important than the muscle health I can figure out, but not to
Right.
lose my brain health. That's freaky.
Yeah. No, I mean that's crucial, right? All aspects of health are important, but brain health is probably the most because if you can't engage and be creative and recognize the people around you and remember what you care about or what you were doing, like then quality of life, even if you're physically quite healthy, just isn't there.
Exactly.
Um, NAD, yeah, I mean, one of the most commonly reported benefits with improving NAD levels is meaningful improvements in brain function. Um, like for me, when I first started working with it, it was like a night and day difference because I started when I was in severe burnout and kind of barely functioning, and did massive amounts of NAD, and it was just like the lights came back on. Um, and you also hear a lot of people reporting benefits in um, sensory awareness. Um, I've heard from a number of people that they feel like their eyesight is crisper than it was, or that they can hear tones that they couldn't hear before. And those are to a large part, those are functions of the brain and nervous system. And so it's one of the secondary effects of giving the brain what it needs. I mean, for brain health specifically, there are other things that are even more powerful. Like the first product we ever built was for brain function, because it's such a necessary part of overall health, right? So we have a product called Qualia Mind, which basically supports all of the different neurotransmitters that are necessary for high functioning brain health in kind of is designed largely like brain chemistry into balance,
Mhm.
and then increase what I refer to as adaptive capacity, right? Can your body produce the right neurochemistry in real time as needed for whatever you're doing, right? Because you want different neurochemistry if you're in a creative process versus a hyper-focused analytical process. Um, and so that product is designed to create balance and then create the ability to effectively adapt to all the different types of situations that you're going to be in. That supplement works incredibly well. That one people usually feel, the vast majority of people feel it the first time they take it. Some people might take a few days, particularly if there's a lot of sleep deprivation. Um, and I mean, as with most things, one of the most important factors is reduce sugar and carbohydrates. Um, the effects of that on brain health are remarkable.
Mhm. Today I'm going tomorrow. It's a low carb USA, which is called Metabolic something Health Society conference here on Coronado Island. And today's focus, the whole day, is about brain health and specifically more Parkinson's research, but
Hmm.
how, nutrition plays a big role in that part of the brain health. So
Absolutely.
just to wrap up, you have so many amazing formulations in Qualia in the product line. Today, we're specifically diving into the role of NAD in our body to create energy as we age. What products, or how do we know where to start if we decide to choose one of your products? Specifically, I guess the Qualia NAD plus, and there's the mitochondria health optimization. I mean, I feel like I need all of them, but I don't want to take 50
Right.
different capsules a day. So guide is kind of the, I guess, order of operations, the dosing, the timing, stacking, any great tips to leave people with.
Yeah, so I mean they're all really beneficial. If you actually take all of them, the difference in quality of life is pretty dramatic. I'm on a trip around Europe right now for like 3 months, and I have one supplement or one suitcase that is just supplements and peptides. Right, and I have every product we make, along with a handful of other supplements. So there is value to doing all of it, and that can be a little overwhelming. So where to start is a bit different for each person. It depends on what your overall priorities are. Um, NAD is one of the most popular products that we make because lack of energy is probably the thing that people struggle with as much or more than anything. And both the NAD product and the mitochondria product will have a huge impact on that. And the mitochondrial product will actually have a more significant effect, but it's also 8 capsules, and the NAD is only 2 capsules. Um, there's a more different things we're trying to accomplish with that other product. So it's phenomenal, but to some extent, that's kind of like for the power user. Um,
Can you empty them
and
out and put them in water if you take the
hmm,
eight and the two and just drink it? Would that be horrible?
it's really not that bad. It's not delicious, but now like mine tastes worse if you take it out of capsule. Although as long as you dilute it well enough, it's not that big of a deal. Like I know a number of people who have a hard time swallowing pills where
Hmm.
they'll open up
Yes.
the mine capsules and they'll pour it in their protein, and there's enough volume of material there that they don't even really notice it.
Mm.
So it that I think works really well. If you just take it and put it in a little bit of water, it's unpleasant.
Hmm.
But it's also not that big of a deal. The mitochondrial one, that one's really not that bad. We have a lot of people who do that because they don't want to swallow that many capsules. Um, but yeah, I think
That
where to start is really a question of what is each person's need, right? If the main thing is better brain function, start with mind. If the main thing is kind of overall energy, NAD is a great place to start. Um, we have a product for sleep if that's the area of challenge. We are working on developing a questionnaire for the website that'll help people decide. But until that's up, we have a very well-educated and highly available customer service team. And people can email, call, text customer service, and they're happy to go through questions and help figure out what the right products might be. We also have
interesting.
just tons of information on the website, so it's pretty easy
Yeah.
to kind of look through and be like, oh, these are the benefits that excite me the most. Um,
Yeah, it's interesting because you think from a practitioner standpoint, looking at gut health to improve brain health, but just how working why backwards, why we have gut issues starts up north again, back into how we eat food and the vagus nerve and stress management and sleep,
mhm.
detoxification. So it's almost kind of the order of we were talking about in the beginning, the foundations, then we move to this one, then move to that. Maybe you cycle back through that you have kind of phases. So would you stay on all of them all the time, or is it good to cycle on off, 5 days on, 2 days off, or a month on, month off?
Yeah, I mean, so like most of our products, the recommended dosing is 5 days on, 2 days off each week. And there are a couple that are every day, but
the reason that we suggest most of them to cycle, and even with that, we'll also say like take a week off every 3 months,
Mhm.
is our physiology didn't develop for getting the same nutrients all the time. Right? When we were sort of
Yeah.
hunter-gatherers, you had what was available, and that changed throughout the seasons, that
Mhm.
changed through drought, through all kinds of stuff. So the body, when it's given the exact same nutrient consistently, it, not always, but oftentimes you can kind of become a little desensitized to it and you get less benefit. So taking intentional breaks and then coming back actually gives more total benefit.
Almost that everything we should change by the season and just think summer, fall, winter, spring, change things up. Maybe do a 5 day reset and then switch up your what area you're focusing on, then cycle it back in and just always because when people need to work on this toxin burden overload and work on opening up the drainage pathways and supporting the liver and then working on the mitochondria, that it's almost that okay, but you need to do that again because your toxins still around your environment and you're still breathing in that mold and you're still working in it that workplace, so it's just kind of an ongoing
Mhm.
cycle, I would think, cycle of
Right,
life.
right. Well, that's the thing is that the world that we live in is challenging. And so that's where, having all the right lifestyle, but also continually doing supplements and changing the supplementation over time based on what the need is, right? If there are things that are more important if you've had more toxicity, and there are other things that are more important if you've had a lot of stress, and like there's all kinds of different impacts. And so, I think one of the things that I think was beneficial about COVID was that there was a kind of culture change that happened where people started to realize that they had to become more self-educated and more empowered around their own health. And this was really critical because for a lot of time, people just sort of deferred all health things to doctors and didn't want to invest in their own education. And even if you don't want to become an expert and devote your whole life to the topic matter, understanding your general physiology, your overall health, understanding some of the basics of nutrition and self-care is kind of like one of the most important things to invest in because the quality of your health is going to be the quality of your life. They're inextricably connected. And so there is a shift that's been happening that's really beautiful to see. And it's a necessary one because it's not the same protocol all of the time. It changes based on your needs, based on your age, your stress levels, whatever's happening in the world. Um, and so investing the time and the energy into becoming educated enough to be able to make progressively better decisions and to also find great functional medicine doctor who has devoted their life to the topic matter and can help with the refinements that might be outside of the scope of what each person chooses to study.
I think it's great you guys are adding a questionnaire to see kind of where are you, figure out where to start. Hopefully, people work with a practitioner to help guide them through the process. And
Mhm.
as you said, similar to what I say, cannot out supplement poor lifestyle habits, as same as the old saying is you cannot out exercise poor nutrition habits. So it's really what I call the holistic method, taking a holistic approach to work on the whole you from the inside out to improve how you age and improve that quality of life is essential. So I thank you for all that information. Where can people connect to Qualia and learn more about getting started?
Mhm. So our website is qualialife.com. Uh, since it's not a common word, I'll spell Qualia, life.com. And all of the products that we make are available there. There's, for the people who are interested, the studies that we've done on all the products are there, as well as just a lot of great educational content, articles, podcast episodes, interviews, all kinds of things.
What does qualia mean? Is it quality or qual? I didn't think about that. Qualia.
No, so qualia is actually a term from philosophy, and it's the word that describes the subjective experience of being uniquely you. So what
Oh,
is it like for you to fall in love? What is it like
oh,
to experience a sunset? And not generally, but what is it like for you as an individual? right? And so
Yeah.
we chose that name because our aim with both the products and with the education was to up level people's qualia, to give better subjective experience of being uniquely you.
Love that. That's great. Well, I thank you so much. And let me know when you're back in town. We still need to do your Pinoy metabolism test, which remind me of qualia because Pinoy means breath and it's a Greek company, but breathing and how the breath is connected to our cellular health. So connect it all
I look
together.
forward to it.
And then you go to Lamati and do the recharge red light therapy station and
Mhm.
do it all together. We got it all in North San Diego.
Yeah,
So,
we're pretty blessed there.
yeah. Well, thank you so much and go enjoy your evening. And I thank you for sharing all this information with us to help us figure out what is NAD, how does it work in our body, why we need it, and how we don't need just NAD itself. There's a reason to what you guys formulated. So thank you.
Thank you. It's great